Next question is about carriage horses. There have been more than 18 carriage horse accidents in Manhattan, injuring drivers, tourists, and horses. New York City carriage horses are massive 1,200-pound animals that have no space for daily passenger turnout and create a safety and cleanliness problem for the city. According to the ASPCA, no amount of regulations can protect horses from the inherent dangers of having an animal in dangerous midtown traffic, and an urban setting cannot meet the physical and psychological needs of these majestic animals. Speaker Quinn has refused to take any action for horses, despite the fact that NYCLASS has even offered to pay 100% of the cost for a pilot program to try out one horseless carriage. Would you actively support and vote for legislation which would phase out the use of horse-drawn carriages in Manhattan, enact a safe, humane retirement of all New York City carriage horses to sanctuaries, and replace them with electric, vintage replica tourist vehicles that provide jobs for current drivers? Let's start on the other end with John Catsimatidis.
Again, I was raised in New York, and my kids were raised in Central Park. I believe that the horses provide a kind of ambiance in Central. Well, why don't you listen? Listen to my speech first. I gave it on Curtis Sliwa's show the other night. And what I believe it. You know how much I love animals. I believe they should be safe. I think they should be limited to Central Park. I believe, let me finish, please. They should be limited to Central Park, provide the ambiance, and the city should provide barn space in Central Park. Keep all the horses together, make sure they're safe, they're not on the streets, make sure they get the proper care, and make sure they're not too old to work. But I love horses. I believe we should not give up the ambiance of New York City, but I believe in keeping them safe, keeping them healthy, and keeping them working. There's no free rides. You don't want to send, you put those horses away. And when those horses are ready to retire, you know what I like to do? Build a small stable and have them as part of the zoo and let people, well, or that's, something, it's only a suggestion, okay? That's the way I feel personally, and that's the way I feel because I love the animals and I think they should be well treated.
Thanks, John. Sal's next.
I think the time...
Somebody clap, please. Thank you.
While horse carriages have had a long tradition here, I think it's time to get them off the city streets. My concern is that we don't cause immediate unemployment for the people that work there and their families. So I would like to see it phased in. I'd like to see the electric cars transitioning to electric cars to make sure that these people are not on the unemployment lines, because many of them depend on this for their living. So I want to transition into that electric car area, but we want to make sure that those people don't lose their jobs.
How long do you think it'll take to transition, Sal?
I'd say there is a human factor here. We got to balance the two, but I'm certainly in agreement that, given the traffic in this city, there should be no horses on that, because they're being abused by the fumes they're inhaling and everything else. But once again, I want to balance it by saying I want to make sure we don't just cause people's families to lose their employment. So electric cars would be the way to go.
Thanks, Sal. John?
Honestly, several years ago when I was a member of the City Council, I did vote for legislation that continued the use of horse carriages in the city, although it had much stricter regulations in terms of the safety and the health standards and the working conditions for the horses in question. To answer your question, Tom, I see no reason why we can't even try one or several electric cars as a pilot program to see if, in fact, that could replace economically the amenities that people have come to know Central Park for. So I'm in favor of that, but in all honesty, I have supported the legislation that continued the the use of horse-drawn carriages.
John,
in
when
New
you
York.
backed that legislation, what were some of the reforms that you wanted then, the regulations that you wanted?
Prior to that legislation, there had been far weaker standards in terms of the kinds of conditions that the horses would live in, the kinds of harnesses that were used on the horses, and the kinds of hours that the horses would be subjected to being in the streets of New York.
Did it change? Did that legislation change it,
Yes. The legislation imposed much stricter standards on the working conditions of the horses.
Great. Thank you, John. Bill?
To me, this isn't even close. I disagree with John Liu and I disagree with John Katsimatidis. We need to get rid of horse carriages now. Here's what's astounding to me. This is inhumane. It's in front of our very eyes. And we don't say, well, look at that. It's inhumane, but it's so quaint and historic. Let's continue it. It doesn't make any sense. So I've been honored to stand with you over these last 2 years fighting for an end to horse carriages. There are alternatives. The alternatives can provide employment right away for the folks who do the work now. And finally, I'm sorry Speaker Quinn's not here to address this issue, but I'm even more sorry Michael Bloomberg's not here to address this issue, because you'll remember when a lot of us advocated an end to horse carriages, he said it would destroy our tourism industry, because apparently the only reason people come to New York City is the horse carriage. I didn't know that. I thought Broadway and restaurants and, but there's no question the time for change is not later, not down the road, not some watered down version. The time for an end to horse carriages is now.
Yeah, it's tough to follow Bill on this one. Look, when I was comptroller, and if you go back and look at the 2 audits that I did that looked at the way that horses were being treated, horse carriages, and the lack of water, and the heat and so many other things, it led to reforms, it led to a lot of change, and I'm very proud of that. I don't support a full ban right now. I have been a supporter, and I guess it was after the briefing by NYCLASS and Steve Nislik and others. I support and I believe that the road that they're going down, literally and figuratively, as far as phasing out, as far as creating the opportunity, or creating that 1-year study, as you point out, and having the electric cars put on the street and creating the financial alternatives for the horse carriages, I believe that's the way to go. And I continue to support that direction, and I've been supportive for a while now.
Thank you. Let me ask a quick follow-up question and just give a 30-second answer each. Why do you think, we heard why the mayor's against it, why do you think Christine Quinn is against this? And what would you say to her and why haven't you said to her directly what you would do? And please, why don't you address that first, John Liu?
Why what?
John Liu. The question is, why do you think Christine Quinn is against this? And what would you say to her if you were having a private conversation with her?
Well, I think she hasn't gotten the okay from Mayor Bloomberg to oppose the mayor. By all rights, Mayor Bloomberg should not be mayor right now. That was an illegal third term. So. But I do want to just ask my friend Bill here a quick question. That bill that I conceded to voting for, how was your vote on that bill?
I cannot tell a lie, John. I don't know which bill. Explain again.
The bill that we all voted for in the city council a few years ago that did allow the continued use of horse carriages in New York City, but created stronger working conditions for them.
John, the notion of having better conditions does not conflict with the notion that some of us came to the conclusion the whole thing was bankrupt and had to be ended. I don't see any contradiction.
So you voted no on that bill? So you voted
John,
no on that bill?
John, I admire your debate technique. But I've been fighting to end horse carriages the last 2 years. I haven't seen you out there with us, so that's the bottom line here. It's time to end this.
So just let's just continue quickly on the same question. Bill de Blasio, how would you respond to Christine Quinn if she were here?
Well, I want to pick up on John's point about obviously she has sought guidance from Mayor Bloomberg, and he has not blessed her to support this change we need. And I would take John's point and take it the next step that, yes, the third term was wrong and undemocratic, and we have the third term because of Christine Quinn. So it all goes together very clearly. I don't think she's listening on this issue. I think people have tried to say there are real alternatives available, and she simply is not willing to entertain them.
Bill Thompson?
I just think it's the failure to look at any other alternative and having a very closed mind. And I hate to chime in and say, and no, probably the mayor hasn't said, go ahead and take a look. So she hasn't done that. But I think it's a question of being able to think a bit outside of the box. I have to admit, sitting through the presentation and looking at the alternatives, looking at different options, looking at, it is an industry, and creating the financial alternatives for those so they won't wind up unemployed. I think that's what she should do.
Sal Albanese?
I hate to be redundant here, but I do believe she is basically listening to the mayor. She's linked her political fortunes with Mayor Bloomberg, and this is one of Mayor Bloomberg's issues. He talks about carriage horses all the time being central to New York City, which I think is ludicrous. But Christine does not want to disappoint the mayor on this particular bill, and that's why she's not really listening or exchanging ideas on this. I would like to think that maybe she's concerned about the unemployment of the workers, but I don't think that's the case.
John Katsimatidis?
You know, I agree with the panel that Christine Quinn is tied very closely to the mayor, and that's why she's not here, and she agrees with Mayor Bloomberg, and that's what it is.
Gotcha. Okay.